So this is an oral history interview with Jeff McKay. It aims to recall the subcultures to which Jeff belonged to back in high school and college, and his experiences at a dance club called Images. Images was located in Brewster, New York, just west of the Connecticut-New York border. It was active roughly during the late 80s, early 90s, and featured DJs, including Jeff, from the local Western Connecticut State University radio station, WXCI. It was a dry club, no alcohol was served, and it attracted what I am roughly calling alternative teens who were growing up in many local towns in the states of New York and Connecticut. And a little bit further out, these teens were part of goth, post-punk, hardcore, and other subculture and counterculture scenes in the area. My name is Samantha Levin, and this interview is taking place on the evening of Saturday, June 11th, 2022, over a video call. While I'm the interviewer here and generally intend to let our interviewee speak about his experiences, I was also part of the same community and may reminisce with him here and there. Hi, Jeff. So
Hello.
excited that we could do this. I'd love to start out with the beginning, where you were born, where you grew up, and what was that like for you?
So I was born and raised in Danbury, Connecticut. Pretty typical upbringing, kind of rural, suburban. The proximity to New York City certainly had a little bit of an influence, but I like to think that my upbringing was a bit more rural. We had gardens, stuff like that. Went to Catholic school pretty much my whole life, actually, now that I think about it, with the exception of 4 years in undergraduate. I can say that my upbringing was fairly typical. However, my parents were pretty young when they had me. They were both 19 years old. I was born in 1967. I literally almost went to the original Woodstock. I would have been 2 years old. The reason I didn't go was because my mother was pregnant with my brother. So I like to say my brother kept me from going to Woodstock. So. But my parents and my grandparents were really both instrumental in my upbringing, and they really embraced, I don't want to say hippie culture, but certainly the idea of self-expression and not necessarily just following the crowd. And I think that really resonated in me, as far as not feeling like you had to conform.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really that kind of set a path for me. As far as some of the exposures that I can really contribute my parents to, musically, it was a very steady diet of Beatles, Beach Boys. My father listened to some other stuff too. He had some Black Sabbath albums, Kiss. So there was a pretty good variety of some, kind of all over the place. But I like to think of it as a real solid core, as far as, there's some very basic structures and melodies and rhythms in that music that appealed to me. And
Of course.
I'll kind of get to that later when I kind of veer over into the music aspect.
Yeah.
And then I went to so I graduated grade school, and I went to the Catholic high school, and it was rough. It was very rough for me. I felt like the summer between 8th grade and freshman year of high school, I felt that a lot of friends changed drastically. And that I really felt that I don't know, I don't want to say that I didn't fit in, but the things that they were taking part in, I really didn't want any part of.
Right.
And the other thing that kind of struck me was that it seemed like they were just following in their uh, older siblings' footsteps, like they weren't themselves, I guess is the best way to put it. And you know, the local classic rock radio station was really, you know, the go-to, and that didn't appeal to me whatsoever.
Right.
I felt like, you know, that was a generation at least before me, if not two. And I really felt like that music didn't speak to me whatsoever.
Right.
Um, and so I think the year was 1982, and the actual album was Thomas Dolby. Um, the album was called The Golden Age of Wireless. And I think that might be, no, well, I digress. The first album, yeah, the first album I bought with my own money was Meatloaf, Bad Out of Hell.
Yes. Okay.
But later, um, it was Thomas Dolby
Yeah.
that I like to say set a trajectory that really changed the path of music that I listened to. Now, coincidentally, at the same time, Daryl Ort, who was a member of the radio station at WestCon,
Mhm.
was starting a new show on Sunday nights, which he called the Adventure Jukebox. And he featured music such as Thomas Dolby with a whole bunch of other, what would be considered, you know, the name is just kind of peculiar. Um, in my mind, it's all the same thing,
Mhm.
because at the time, um, it wasn't as separated into subgenres as it became later on. So it was always, you know, new wave, punk,
Mhm.
whatever you wanted to call it,
Mhm.
hardcore. That's what he was playing, and all of a sudden, it was like, okay,
And
this really is speaking to me.
and it's Daryl Ort. O-R-T. Can you spell his last name?
OHRT.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Sadly, Daryl passed several years ago. And you know, there are several individuals that I can say really helped to guide the path of my life from that point forward, and he was definitely one of them. Not only in a musical sense, but also in a way of how he looked at the world,
Mhm.
um, and an opportunity, um, and kind of seeing things in a very, I mean, saying different is just kind of trite.
Yeah.
Um,
In what context?
he was extremely innovative. He saw things that in ways that no one else saw them,
Mhm.
and I that was a quality in him that I so admired. Um, you know, and was just kind of in awe of like, wow, like this guy just like he's one step ahead of everyone else.
Right.
And I was always, you know, like, how does he do it? You know, sort of thing. Um,
How
and
old was he at the time? Do you
so
know?
yeah, Daryl, so he must have been around 19 or 20 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Um, because I believe he was a sophomore at the radio station when he started the Adventure Jukebox. And then eventually what that led to was um, he and Keith Bisogno, I am not spelling his last name. Um, yeah, um,
No problem.
yeah, yeah. Um, were instrumental in changing the format of the radio station altogether. So
Okay.
where they had kind of like this kind of rock, jazzy, free form, they decidedly went alternative at that point, and it was a, you know, kind of all or nothing thing.
Mhm.
Um, I think that it was met with a little, I don't want to say animosity, but certainly it felt like, who do they think they are, coming in and taking over our radio station. But fortunately, they had a faculty advisor who was, the man is truly brilliant. His name is Hugh McCarney. It's spelled like it sounds.
Okay.
And he truly, he is such a facilitator of ideas. He truly was the type of person that was perfect as a faculty advisor, in the sense that he never made it his. It was always about the students, and he would offer advice, or kind of pop in his 2 cents, but he never made it his. He never said, this is what I think you should be doing, or he might say, have you considered this, or that's a fantastic idea, roll with it, go with it, take it from there. So yeah, I'd have to say those individuals set the course of the radio station.
Right.
So things were changing for me in high school. Like I said,
Right.
I really didn't feel like I was part of the in crowd per se. Very cliquey, as most high schools are.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say like I felt like an outsider. Like, I just kind of felt like I was kind of friends with everybody.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel like the necessity to belong to any one particular clique or whatever.
Yeah.
And I certainly, how should I put it? The music that I listened to was not popular, and the way that I dressed was not popular at the time. It was
Right.
certainly looked at as something different.
Mhm.
And it would be years later that that became a lot more acceptable.
Right.
It's funny now that I look around and see what, how people color their hair, and
Yeah.
piercings and tattoos. And, it's the sort of thing in 1982 to 85 that was not the norm by any means. And certainly received a far different reaction.
Can you, can you describe how you were dressing that was different from other students?
Yeah, I mean, it was the sort of thing. We had a dress code at the high school, so
Right.
there was a certain amount of conforming within that, but skinny leather ties. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Think of like a Devo video, and yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it was the sort of thing. I didn't care. I kind of I wore what I wanted to wear because I liked the way it looked, and I didn't want to wear what everyone else was wearing. I thought that, I was brought up to be an individual, and I wanted to express that. And you know, so I started with the clothing. I started with the music,
Mhm.
not really realizing where that would lead me at the time. I was just kind of doing my thing. And it's strange talking about it now, because the bands that were considered alternative at the time were, soon to become massive,
Yeah.
and just completely break that mold.
Mhm.
But it was just a coincidence that I happened to be kind of in the right place at the right time
Right.
for that all to explode into what it was going to in just a few years time. Essentially, I don't know if there's a pinnacle of it, but the music and the culture between 1985 and 1989 it just became huge.
Yeah.
And prior to this, college radio was just kind of looked as almost as like a throwaway in the music industry.
Yeah.
Um, they never really saw it as a viable moneymaker sort of thing.
Right. Right.
And I think what happened was, there was just a void,
Yeah.
that needed to be filled. And I think that the music that was coming out was just so creative
Mhm.
and undeniably very, very good. Um,
This is like Depeche Mode and Cure and that kind of thing, or
even more mainstream, like the Cars, the Police, U2.
okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
those bands were Joe Jackson. Those bands were really alternative at the time. The
Mhm.
Pretenders,
Yeah.
um, you were not hearing those bands on commercial radio.
Right.
Um, so, I mean, even, David Bowie was still considered somewhat alternative, so um, bands like The Cure, Depeche Mode, they were still up and coming, at least in the States, in England and in Europe. I always felt like they were a little bit ahead of us as far as that goes. But, even American bands like REM, um, and Silk Blondie, they were still considered alternative, and it
Right.
was the rare track that you would hear, but you weren't going to hear anything but the hits per se.
Right.
And college radio really embraced all of that, and
Yeah.
that all of a sudden just it exploded, like I said. um, and I remember Spin Magazine doing an article on college radio and how it was becoming the new big thing. And actually, the radio station WXCI was featured, and yeah, it was pretty cool. Um,
Do you know
yeah,
what year that was? Do you know when that was?
I want to say it was 1986.
Okay.
I know that the music director and the program director at the time, the music director was Candace Williams,
Mhm.
and I believe Greg Higgins was the program director at the time. Those are the two principal individuals responsible for the music. So that just happened to be who was doing it at the time that article came out.
Right.
Prior to that, Daryl was the music director and program director at one time. And Corey,
Mhm.
or Anarchy as she went by,
Mm.
Morgan Williams. They're all, very key individuals in shaping the sound and the direction of WXCI.
Mhm.
And I think that it it was more than just the music. I think, and I don't think that I don't know if it was intentional that they were creating a culture.
Yeah.
Um, I think it all just kind of melded together
Mhm.
and kind of created itself, um, where, the music was part of it, the way you dressed was part of it. But, beyond that, it was also a way of thinking,
Yeah.
accepting others. It was very much more open-minded than what was going on in 1985, which in retrospect feels very, very conservative. Even, to today's standards, very conservative, but even back then, things felt pretty tight.
Mhm.
So, as it was an alternative to that mindset.
Right.
And that I, like I said, expressing the individuality, really appealed to me.
Yeah.
Um, So when I graduated high school and started at WestCon, I, I I think it was the first day that I went to the radio station, and it was like I found my people. Like I just it wasn't even subtle. I
Right.
mean,
Right. It's a
you know,
great
like
feeling.
it really was, because for a very long time, um, there was no real um, defined culture in the sense that there was a place where we would all meet,
Right.
or you might have friends, but it wasn't like you can go somewhere, or you can go to the rare concert, but as a teenager, that was kind of difficult.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden in college, things changed, and so a couple things were going on at the same time, where um, being between Boston and New York, Toad's Place in New Haven was able to attract a lot of the bands that were playing on the radio like midweek. So, I mean, I'm not exaggerating. The Cure played at Toad's Place,
Wow.
Yeah, Tears for Fears played at Toad's Place.
Right.
And the idea of that, I mean, a venue that, holds maybe 500 people, it's astounding, to think that
Yeah.
in a couple short years they would go to sellout stadiums.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that was it. There was a couple other places too. There was the Agora Ballroom, which I believe was in Hartford, and then there was Anthrax, which really gravitated more towards the hardcore scene.
Right.
So it was very peculiar to be where we were in Connecticut geographically,
Mhm.
because I felt that in retrospect, I really feel that we were very fortunate
Mhm.
to have access to this music, both on the radio and at live shows,
Mhm.
where I think if we were someplace else, like Midwest, or even a little bit further rural, where like if you were, say, like Northwest Connecticut,
Yeah.
you were out of that range, and you just didn't have access to it. And I think having the access to it really it brought a lot of people together.
Yeah.
It provided opportunity that that had been lacking in a lot of people's lives up until that point.
Right. 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 Um, sorry, were you going to say something else?
No.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about this, but how would you describe the subculture that that we were a part of? It comes from different genres, but what did it look like? Like,
Yeah. So what was great about the early days of this transition is that we were all the same, in the sense that we were all the alternative kids. So
mhm,
whether you gravitated towards the hardcore scene, or you're kind of into the hippie vibe, or you're like really into new wave, or we're all the same. We
yeah,
all hung out together. It was a very accepting and open-minded culture.
mhm,
And it what was peculiar was that this open-mindedness had to be a subculture, where um, the cultural norm was to conform at that time,
mhm,
and really not express yourself as an individual. It was really more about kind of going with the flow,
mhm,
which yeah, I think that may have been part of why the culture developed.
mhm,
I feel like a lot of individuals felt like, this doesn't appeal to me. I'm looking for something else.
right,
And I feel like, just breaking out of that mold and being able to express yourself and be accepted,
mhm,
that was the subculture. And what was, like I said, what was fantastic about it in the early days was that we're all the same.
mhm,
There was no subgenres at the time where, it kind of became splintered later.
Yeah.
But in the early days, we didn't see that. It wasn't, you can go see The Cure and then go see Suicidal Tendencies and then go see the Go-Go's. And it wasn't thought of, there was nothing wrong with that. It was all part of the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. So the early days, that transitional period, was fantastic. And like I said, we were kind of a little late to the game because, in England and in Europe, this had already been going on. The punk scene started in the, mid to late 70s, and then the post-punk scene after that. So, we're kind of talking about a little bit after that.
Right.
However, we were embracing all of those scenes at the same time.
Right.
For us, it was all that represented an alternative to, what we had been force-fed for so long.
Right. So how did you wind up at Images at this nightclub? How did that happen? And what year did that happen?
Okay, so I was at the radio station doing a show for a while, actually, several shows. And Ann Corey, I don't know if she approached them or if they approached her. They wanted to do an alternative night on Friday nights, and started it essentially. I was going just, kind of as a patron, dancing and, just enjoying the music and loving it.
Cool.
And I think Anne, just schedule wise, every Friday was too much for her. And she asked if I would be interested in splitting it with her. And I jumped on the opportunity, faster than you can say go. Yeah, I was so excited at the idea of it. And really, come on, play the music that you love as loud as you like and get paid for it. Really, twist my arm,
Yeah. And that was what, 1986? 1986.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Great. And what was that like? What was your first night DJing like?
Oh, I was nervous as a kid that forgot to study for a test. Like all these things are swirling through your head of, what should I play? How am I going to keep them on the dance floor? And
right.
But I didn't want to sound like Anne. I didn't want to be, a copycat sort of thing. I wanted it to be my own. So, so I kind of experimented with some stuff, and it was fun. It was like, it was received really well. The owners were really happy. And it just became a thing. Anne and she would do one week, I would do the following. And it was fantastic. It worked out really, really well. I have to give, huge kudos to John Petrillo. Yes. Yeah. So he and I don't know if Frank was part owner or if he was just kind of helping him out, but I think John was really the individual who instigated or started an underage club. I think it was a bowling alley, and then it was an archery range, and they actually still used it as an archery range. Before, when I would get there early, they were putting the targets away. You guys never saw that, but yeah, they were still using it as an archery range. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so they turned it into this underage club, and I still try and think like what he got out of it. I think financially my best guess is they were probably breaking even, if that. Certainly, weather depending. There are some nights where I think there was 10 kids there. But as the popularity grew, the crowd grew, and it was just it took on a life of its own. It really became the place to go. It was the place to go on Friday night. Um, there were other clubs in the area too. Ivy, Krypton, and Morgan Williams, who I mentioned earlier, was also DJing at a place. At the time it was called, I want to say Promises, and then it turned into City Limits, but I might be wrong. I know ultimately it was City Limits.
Okay.
And they gave him a Wednesday night because it was dead. You know, they had nothing to lose. If they drew one person in more than they had, it was worth it for them.
Right.
You know, there was nobody on the dance floor. There was dollar drinks, and you know, I distinctly remember going there being like, this is so strange. Like, I really wouldn't expect these guys to be listening to this type of music. They
Right.
weren't there for the music. They were just there for the dollar drinks.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty
Right.
much it. So, you know, the irony there was, as the scene and the music grew, Wednesday night turned into their biggest night. We had a bigger draw on Wednesdays than they did on Fridays and Saturdays. And the owners of City Limits
Mhm.
actually wanted to, they're like, you know, can you come on Friday night? And like,
Nope.
no, no.
And I just want to fill in some information. You started DJing at City Limits as well. Around what time?
So City Limits was maybe about a year after I'd already been DJing at Images. So I want
Okay.
to say 87-ish, 87,
Okay.
88. Yeah, in that area. Same scenario. You know, Morgan was really, he kind of was moving on, and he didn't have the time to do it. He asked if I would fill in a couple times. And, you know, the same sort of thing where his style was very different than mine,
Mhm.
which I love. You know,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how much I respect and admire, you know, listening to those guys DJ. They're phenomenal. And you know, it's the sort of thing where you know, when you know what it is to DJ and you can really appreciate another DJ, it's something special. You know, it's like, okay,
Right.
they have a pulse or a finger on the pulse of the crowd, and they can really, you know, get everyone going and really read it. And I think that's really part of the fun of it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, City Limits started after Images
Mhm.
for me. Yeah.
Okay.
So the difference too was I had to be 21
Yeah.
because yeah, City Limits was you know, a drinking bar. So
Right.
that was part of it too.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the drinking age had just gone up in Connecticut. Am I right about that?
It was a little bit earlier.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. I think it was right around the time I turned 18. They decided, okay, yeah, 21. I'm like, yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right,
So
right,
yeah, it jumped from 18 to 21.
right.
But I, you know, for me it was more about the music than drinking anyway. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So how many years did you DJ at Images? Like what year did you stop? What happened with Images at the end?
Okay, so I really don't know what happened with the actual building per
Mhm.
se, because what they did was they built a new building, like literally from the ground up. They changed the name to Boardwalk,
Mhm.
and we moved everything over there. It was, you know, essentially a mile down the road, but it was the same thing.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot was changing. Somewhere like, I want to say around 88 or 89. Um, all of a sudden record companies were hip to the fact that they can sell a lot of um, music through college radio. So we started getting a lot more attention,
Mhm.
um, which was both good and bad. It was good in the sense that, you know, you've got the artists that, you know, really deserve to be heard all of a sudden being heard and getting far more exposure.
Mhm.
Like I said, The Cure, instead of playing at Toad's Place, is now selling out, you know, Giant Stadium.
Right.
Um, so in, you know, in that sense, it was really good. On the downside, though, they kind of pigeonholed the music.
Mm.
So, you know, they what gelled us all together was starting to splinter apart.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden you had like goth, industrial,
Right.
new wave, hardcore, and it was like, it wasn't all the same vibe. It wasn't, when I was DJing, you would see groups of people on the dance floor for certain songs, and then you'd play other songs and you'd see other groups of people, and it was like, that splintering kind of, it felt different.
Yeah.
Coincidentally with that was the advent of a lot more electronic music. I mean, at the time it was called techno, and then all the sub genres, a million of them that spawned from that. And with techno, there was a lot more of like a drug culture. Ecstasy was coming out to the scene, and that really, it really felt different.
Mhm.
There was an element there that it just wasn't, it wasn't there in the early days, where
Right.
you felt like you're a part of something.
Right.
It kind of felt like, you know there was, a gang that kind of moved in, and I don't want to point fingers at them, but it's the sort of thing where it was bound to happen.
Yeah.
It was heading in that direction, and I kind of felt it at that time, and I thought, this isn't what I'm about any longer. This isn't speaking to me.
Yeah.
And it really felt different. And I don't know, the a lot of the original people that were going were being replaced
Mhm.
by people that really didn't get it. They didn't understand what it was really all about.
Right.
I like to give the example of, when Nirvana had released, what smell, no, what is it?
I can't
Come
remember.
on. Yeah, I know, I'm drawing a blank on
The
the
Baby in the
they,
Water.
I'm sorry,
The Baby in the Water album.
never mind.
Yes.
Yeah, 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 the album that pretty much defined a genre.
Mhm.
But when that happened, so all of a sudden you saw these people coming and like slam dancing, but not really understanding what slam dancing was all about. They thought it was just like all about like throwing punches and running into people and just being pretty much idiots.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, like, like
Yeah.
they don't get it. Like they don't understand what this is about.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was kind of one of I kind of, told you this anecdote before about, a night at City Limits where, the Thursday, I'm sorry, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving was always their biggest night of the year. I mean, you literally couldn't move in that place. And everyone was home from college, and
Mhm.
the music was huge. And I was DJing, and I mean, it was just fun. It was like a really, really good night. It was going great. And the owners came up to me, and he said something to the effect of, I wish I could remember his exact words because it was just so condescending. I think he said, "There's a lot of like our normal crowd here tonight." I'm like, normal crowd? Because I was pretty sure that, yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the Wednesday night crowd was your crowd. I thought that this was your big night. But in any case, all right, your normal crowd's here tonight. So he said, we're gonna have, one of the other DJs spin for a little while. I'm like, wait, what? Because I've had the dance floor packed all night.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, it's only going to be a little bit. Okay. So I stepped down from the DJ booth, and I think within 30 seconds, he cleared the floor. It wasn't even subtle. I mean, it was fantastic. I think there were 5 people on the dance floor, and he spun for about 20 minutes, and everyone's like, Jeff, just please, just, you have to go back up there. So in the DJ booth was the light guy who was there every Wednesday night doing the lights,
Mhm.
the other DJ, and I stepped in, and the other DJ says to me, "This is the hardest crowd I've ever worked. These guys won't dance to anything." I'm like, "Well, it's a different crowd tonight." He says, this was, oh my God, it was just so patronizing.
Yeah.
He says, I left a song on so that, you should be able to mix your music in with it pretty easily. I'm like, oh, okay. So you clear the dance floor for 20 minutes and now you're going to patronize me? Fantastic. Okay. So here's how this is going to go. I
Right.
let his record go into the run out groove, and I didn't turn the volume down. So over the speakers, full volume, you just heard one in the crowd is looking up at me.
Jeff?
And the sound and the DJ.
Jeff, hold on. I am so sorry.
Okay.
Climax of your story, and my internet is apparently feeling it because it's being a pain in the butt. Hold on a second. I'm gonna turn my video off. All right. Can you rewind a little bit? You're going back up into the booth, and the lighting guy is there, and the DJ.
So he's like I said, he was being very patronizing. Like, I can mix my music in with his music, no problem. I'm like, all right. So I let his record run out into the run out groove, full blare.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't even subtle. And,
Right.
I was certain at that time I had the attention of everyone who was there. And the light guy's screaming, let it go. And the DJ's going, let it go. And I had queued up Lords of Acid, I Sit on Acid, which just starts off with that, darling, come here, fuck me up. And just this bombastic bass. And you couldn't count to 10 before you couldn't move on the dance floor.
Yes, of course.
And I turned to the DJ and I said, that's how it's done.
Yeah.
And he walked off. I mean, his jaw was just completely slack. Like, he had no idea what just happened to him.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was in a tiff. I mean, I'm like, okay, so you're going to steal 20 minutes from me, patronize me. I'm going to turn this place inside out tonight. And I just proceeded to turn into like one of my all-time favorite nights of DJing. I mean, it was phenomenal. There were people just coming up. They're like, Jeff, please just play one bad song, just one. Like, not tonight.
Nope, not gonna happen.
Tonight we are all leaving here drenched.
Wow.
Yeah, and we did. It was phenomenal. It was, like I said, it was one of my most memorable DJing nights out of hundreds and hundreds of them. That was one that I felt like that may have been one of the pinnacles of that last vibe before things really started to change. And I really felt like like that night everyone was in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
That culture, we were all right there.
Right.
I mean, I remember who was there, and kind of talk about it to this day. Like, just that was something, that was a special night.
Wow.
So yeah, it was the sort of thing we didn't even realize at the time what it was going to turn into.
Right.
We never set out to create this culture that was going to explode. For all we knew, it wasn't going to. It was just going to be this small little niche of individuals that were really into things that weren't on the mainstream.
Right.
Both, musically, dress wise, thought wise. I mean, so one of and I this is a good segue to someone who is, I should say, two individuals who are very integral to the scene, and that is Malcolm and Kathy, when they opened up Trash American Style.
Yes, I'm gonna go back to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So they opened it up in a store. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I think you can fit 5 people in there, but you all had to move in unison if there were 5 people there. I mean, it was so small, and they had so much stuff in there. But it was like, it was phenomenal. I mean, it was like walking into a treasure chest. I mean, you know, I it was just everything in our culture in one place. And then eventually they moved to a much larger area, and it it just was fun just to go there, you know, just to be there and be amongst that culture. It was fantastic. And you know, Malcolm certainly, you know, similar to Daryl, he had his finger, he was always one step ahead. You know, it was the sort of thing where it's like, wow, like these individuals are turning on me onto music that it's phenomenal. And you know, I give him as much credit in helping to direct, you know, how things turned out for me as I do, you know, everyone else I've mentioned so far.
What were their full names again? It was Malcolm
Tent.
Tent. Tent.
Malcolm Tent.
Okay.
Get it?
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Kathy, for the life of me, I don't know if I ever knew her last name.
Right,
I
right.
swear to God. Yeah. They had the greatest postcards though. I remember there was one in particular she sent out, and you know, it just said trash American style. And it said something to the effect of it's a verb, not a noun.
Okay.
So the idea was to trash American style, not trash
Gotcha.
American. Yeah,
I
got
didn't
it.
know that. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, see that? Yeah, so that was, yes.
So much
There,
pun.
there you go. So right. So, you know, that was always the you know, if you got it, you know,
Yeah,
that was great. Yeah. It wasn't, you know, you're going there for trash. You
right.
go trash. And it was that's what it was all about.
Yeah,
But you know, that said, we were also, there were two, well, no, I'm gonna say 3 other record shops in the area that were, oh, I mean, just absolutely phenomenal.
right.
There was Brass City Records. Walter was the owner of Brass City.
Okay.
He was absolutely, he would remember every person who walked in the door and the music that they liked. And
Mhm.
he'd say, oh, you know what, I found this. And I think, you know, because you bought this the last time you were here, you're going to really like this. And he was phenomenal. Then there was Phoenix Records. Phoenix Records, when it was very first opened, was in for all I can gather, an abandoned dance studio in Waterbury. And it was like on a 3rd floor walk up, you know, creaky, dusty stairs, windows floor to ceiling. Where there wasn't glass, it was posters everywhere, everywhere. And I mean, thousands upon thousands of records. If you couldn't find it there, it didn't exist. I mean, it was, yeah, it was phenomenal. And I don't know that individual's name. We just called him the professor. And I remember he wrote everything he sold down in what would be the equivalent of like 4-point font on this notebook. I'm like, dude, can you see that? Like for real? Like,
Wow.
yeah. But he was brilliant, and you know, like I said, just going into these places was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Then there were two places in New Haven too. One was Cutler's. Cutler's was kind of a little bit more mainstream, but they did have the occasional, they had some good stuff there, but you had to kind of get lucky. And then there was another place, I always forget the name of the place. It was upstairs from a hair cutting salon.
Mhm.
And that record shop was phenomenal too. Oh my goodness. And it was just, it was really, you know, going into these places, I feel like, it was just so all part of it for me.
Yeah.
I stepped into like a Christmas land for me, just flipping through the records and just being like, oh my God, I can spend thousands here, no problem. And truth be told, I did.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it
Yeah.
happened to, it's almost like the music. Would you say that the music and knowing the names of the bands and the names of the members and the lyrics and the feel of it and the sound, it became kind of a language of our community?
Oh, I mean, it was even more than that. I mean, there were record labels. There were, artists that were, associated with record labels that, I would buy just because I would buy an album just because it was on that label. Um,
Right, right.
ne- you know, Sub Pop, Network, 4AD, IRS, all these labels. Um, I'm not sure if Merge was around yet, but it may have been. But in any case, there was all these, what were considered kind of very small labels at the time. Um, this is where you found them. I mean, that's where you went to find the music that was on those labels.
Right.
And yeah, it just had not been picked up by the mainstream record companies yet. So if you wanted to listen to this music and you didn't have access to a radio station, or you wanted to listen to it, whenever,
Right.
this is where you went to get it.
Right, right. And can we go back to Trash American Style for a
Sure.
minute? Can you talk about, so the first location was in Brookfield,
Mhm.
and the second one moved to Danbury, I believe.
Yes, on Mill Plain. Yep.
Right, right, right. Um, they had vinyl and cassettes, right? And what else was in there? Can you describe what you saw when you went
Oh
in?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, first, the first thing that struck you was it smelled like incense. That would be Kathy.
Right,
Um, yeah. But there was not, I don't know what color the walls were. I mean, everything. There was, albums, posters, all this various paraphernalia,
mhm,
all, the walls, the ceilings, just completely covered. Um, there were clothes there. There were books. You name it. It was all part of that same culture,
mhm.
where you can just delve into, like, just immerse yourself into it. That's what I meant when I said, like, going there just felt good, because you
Yeah,
felt like this is where I belong.
yeah,
This is exactly what I've always been looking for.
yeah.
And that's really what they created. And I don't know, it was certainly, they had me to make a living, so their intent was to sell.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're becoming like a cultural hub was just coincidental, purposeful, or just, it just happened because of what they created, what they had available. Um, I can say, I've really only experienced that a couple other times, at other, outlets that, sold music, but sold other things too, that really kind of spoke to the whole culture of it all.
Right, right.
So yeah, and going in there, you could almost be guaranteed to see someone you knew, and just shoot up conversation. Oh, I heard you went to this concert. How was it? Whatever. Or are you going to this? But I don't think I ever walked in there without, there being a handful of people in there, and it was just like, the camaraderie was there. It was that same understanding, that mutual, feeling that you were
Right.
part of something different, that was very embracing and understanding at the same time, and just, it was non-judgmental.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, and I think that, you know that may have been one of the biggest parts of the culture that really was so appealing and resonated with so many people that gravitated towards it. You know, you can be yourself, you can do whatever you want. You know, if at the time, you know, you wanted to shave the bottom half of your head and color the top purple, I was
Right.
like, that's fantastic, you know. I mean, now it's nothing, but then, you know, it was completely different. And you know, I think that that really kind of captured what it was all about. You know,
Yeah.
you. I wish there were videos of just, you know, it's so peculiar how you know, we have such easy access to videos now, but videos back then were very rare. I mean, you know, video cameras, you know, were bulky and large, and you know, it wasn't like, you know, you can just whip them out. So I do wish there was more documentation from that time, um, of, you know, actual footage. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be cool to kind of go back. I know there are some videos of images, and they're just fantastic to watch. I just, you know,
Hard to
um,
they're all dark and
well, right, yeah. I mean, certainly the production was about as low key as you can get, but you know, despite that, you can still get a feel for, you know, what was going on. You
mhm.
know, just the attitude and the reactions and the interactions between um, the individuals you saw there. It was like, there's something here. There's something about this,
Mhm.
you know, that's unlike, you know, just walking into a club.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, and that's what I always loved about it. That's what I you know, really why I loved DJing there. It was, you know, aside from the fact playing the music that you love loud and getting paid for it, seeing being part of that culture, it was just so rewarding. And I never, you know, I, I, I never felt like, you know, celebrated as a DJ. I never really bought into that idea of, you know, a DJ being anything special. I thought that was like ridiculous, because really all you're doing is playing someone else's songs. I mean, yeah, you know, there's something about reading a crowd and, you know, being able to mix music well, but it's not rocket science. But being part of that, you know, and understanding why the crowd would react to what you were playing and and how they would react to it, you know, that was important.
Right.
And I think that was a part of it that I, I I I felt like it was more than just going there and playing music.
Right. Right. So where are you now? Looking back at that time, you went out and you got a different kind of degree that was separate from music. You're a physical therapist now. Uh,
Right.
um, what still influences you? What influenced you from back then to now?
I mean, you know, there's so many things that I incorporate into my professional and personal life that, you know, that just set the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Um, being a physical therapist for me, um, I love being a physical therapist. I work on the rehab unit at Danbury Hospital, and most of the patients that I work with have either had a stroke or some pretty devastating event happen in their lives. And it's very peculiar because at that point, all facades are stripped away, and you really get people to see what they're made of at their true core. You see, you know, true fear and true not knowing what their life is going to be defined as any longer, and to be able to um, work with that individual and get them to a point where they understand that life is still worth living and has a lot to offer. It's just such a magical thing. The walking, certainly that's important, but for me, the physical part of physical therapy is at best 30 to 40%. The rest of it is really what makes it so appealing to me. And I think what I experienced in the culture at Images and in the music was to see people that we really are the same. you know um we have the same fears, we have the same
Right.
desires, the same drive. People have different ideals, religion, politically, but when you strip that all away, and you get to the core, we're very similar. And I think that um, one of the things that I took from that culture was just that open-mindedness to see people for as they are,
Yeah.
and be able to embrace that, and respect individuals regardless of whatever their culture might be.
Mhm.
None of that matters to me. As a physical therapist, I'm going to give you 110% to get you back
Yeah.
as best I can. And I think that comes from that ideal, that culture of just, it was always about celebrating the individual, and a zest for life, and celebrating life, not, I mean, God, it sounds so friggin' hokey when I say it that way, but, you know, it was about just that, like, that culture was about being open to ideas and being open to art and music, and different points of view, and embracing it and understanding that this is what makes up the world. This is you know this is how our culture is defined by variety, as opposed to being stagnant and everyone being the same. And that's really that grew in me from that culture, from the music, from the individuals that I that came in and out of my life. I mean, you know I it's all part of the same thing for me. I can't tease anything away, because it's all one and the same.
Right.
Yeah, like I said, it sounds hokey as crap, but holy cow. um I mean, really,
It's
it
hard to
does.
find words to describe it, it sounds like.
Well, because words kind of fall short. you
Yeah.
know I can say the words, but it doesn't really give you the feeling of what it meant to be part of that, and to understand, to have an understanding for what it meant to be part of that culture, to be part of you know being open-minded, and seeing people for as they are, and listening. um I feel like it's so strange, but I feel like our culture has really lost the ability to listen.
Yeah.
We already have an answer before a person has stopped talking.
Mhm.
And I think the ability to listen and hear a person, um, that's the greatest form of respect that you can pay a person. And by doing that, my grandfather said, listen, Jeff, you don't have to like everyone, but you do have to respect them.
Yeah.
And I felt like, yeah, that's so true. And I feel, like I said, listening to a person, hearing them, and understanding is the greatest form of respect that you can pay a person. And then from there, acting on it. So my role as a physical therapist is to hear a person, hear their fears, hear, what they want to accomplish in physical therapy, and through the skills that I've learned, make it happen. And it all becomes one and the same.
Yeah. Do you still consider yourself to be goth?
Honestly, I don't know if I don't know if I felt goth.
Right.
If I felt anything, it was new wave.
Okay.
I guess if I had to label myself, it was new wave. Yeah. But like I said, when things started to splinter, I didn't. I still would go out and buy Skinny Puppy, buy My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, buy the Cocteau Twins, the Sundays, the Smiths, the Cure, because to me it was still all the same thing.
Yeah.
I never had that necessity to pigeonhole and say, well, I'm not going to listen to to U2 any longer because now they're popular, and or whatever, it doesn't conform, because then I would be just as guilty as what I was already
Right.
kind of against. It was contradictory, and I thought that doesn't make sense. Why would a band that I've loved for years, why would I discredit them now that they're popular? That's ridiculous.
Right.
So yeah, it was, yeah. I don't know if I would consider myself goth. And I can tell you that goths would not consider me goth.
Okay, that's fair. And I am asking you, do you label yourself, Jeff?
Well, no, I'm trying not to. Like I said, I still, um, I still like the idea of adhering to being open-minded with music. Giving it a listen. I mean, one of my favorite conversations, although this is kind of meaningless now, was I would love to ask somebody, what was the last album you bought? And that's such a great conversation starter. Because like, oh, like what did you get out of it?
Mhm.
It just it gives you an insight into what this person is about. And it, not necessarily only in our crowd, but just I would love asking people that question.
Yeah.
I mean, even to this day, I ask it and people kind of raise their eyebrow,
Yeah.
because they say, well, I downloaded. That's not the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No one ever asks you what was the first thing you downloaded, but they will ask you what was the first album you owned. So
I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember the last album I bought. I downloaded an album recently that I did not.
so what was the last thing you downloaded?
I don't remember the name of the album, but the artist's name, which I'm probably going to butcher, is Yasachik, and it's pseudo electronic and classical. It's very haunting music.
I love haunting.
Yes.
I love ethereal, atmospheric music. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Is there anything else?
Um, aside from the obvious, that I want to thank you for doing this.
Sure.
I think that I think that I hope that this paints a very bold picture of something that happened that was very important to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I know for a fact many people's lives were changed for the better for what occurred in that small little building and on that radio station.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it resonates still to this day. So I thank you for bringing light to that. And
Yeah.
like I said, I'm hoping that in the different interviews, you're going to get a real sense for, what it was all about, why it was so important, and how it still is important.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Jeff, for
Uh,
your enthusiasm and the way that you brought all of us together through your music. And even I want to add your back when MySpace was a thing and we were all reconnecting and whatnot, you offered to send us all CDs of different sets. I think there were 35 sets, 35
y-
CDs.
yeah, that actually blossomed into 100.
Oh, wow.
And one of our when one of the icons of the culture passed away, we had a huge celebration for him. And yeah, I put together a set of the 100 CDs, and I even like whipped out my woodworking skills and made a case for it. And yeah, it was auctioned off, and the proceeds went to a charity that the individual, how should I put it, he championed. There we go.
I didn't know that. That's really wonderful to hear. When did that happen?
So that was several years ago. That was Neil Bucher. Yeah, just an amazing individual. And like I said, an icon in the culture that I'm speaking of. And yeah, when he passed, it wasn't subtle, like Daryl. You have these individuals. I had, I'm going to get hokey again for a second.
Do it.
And
Bring it on.
all right, here we go. I asked a friend once if she believed in the idea of soulmates. And what she said to me was, I believe in soul guides. And I thought about that, and I thought, that really makes a lot more sense to me, because I wouldn't consider my grandfather a soulmate, but I certainly consider him a soul guide. And I feel like there are a lot of individuals that have come into my life that I feel have helped guide my soul
Yeah.
to become what I have become. And that idea really resonates with me, and I feel like I feel it resonates with other people within our culture too. We built such a strong bond
Mhm.
because of what it was, that we can, just saying the word soul guide,
Mhm.
I can think of individuals, and my suspicion is people watching this will understand what I'm talking about when I say it.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I can relate to that. For sure.
yeah, yeah. Like I said, it was going to be pretty hokey, so I think I accomplished that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
Um, well, thank you so much, Jeff. I'm really excited that we found time to record this, and hopefully I'll be getting it online so we can share it with people pretty soon.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.